The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a story, okay? The story is by a pastor named Rick Azell. And honestly, there's a lot of things in here I stole from him because the man knows his business about worship, okay? So I took a lot of his guidance when I was doing some worship studies. He has a lot of different studies, and I really did take a lot of guidance from him because he knew what he was talking about. Well, the guys,
did you mention his name in the...
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, his name is Pastor Rick Azell. Azell. It's like gazelle, but Azell. So I'm going to read his story because I think it's a really cool story, and the way he describes it at the end is awesome. So I wanted to make sure I read that. So on a family vacation, my family and I visited Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone is a geological, habited with hundreds of geysers and hot springs. I typed it wrong. With hundreds of hot springs and geysers. One of the first stops in the scenic wilderness was this geyser known affectionately as Old Faithful. Old Faithful is one of the most visited of all geysers for the simple reason it is faithful. It is not the tallest geyser or the most beautiful, but it is faithful. Presently, one can count on Old Faithful erupting every 8 minutes. On the day we went to Yellowstone, we arrived with about 78 minutes to spare. 78 seconds to spare. On the day, the National Park Service has built a boardwalk that circles the old geyser with benches around one side. So you can stand on one or the other sides. But when the geyser erupts, you will get a shower. The historic hotels and giant shops fan out from the geyser, no doubt about it. Old Faithful is the center of attention. As the time for eruption got closer, more and more tourists joined our family, sitting on benches or on the boardwalk. Latecomers stood behind. Many had their cameras, videos, and still trained like weapons on the famous hole in the ground. As the time for eruption got closer, more and more tourists joined our family, sitting on the benches or on the boardwalk. I read that part. From the steam rising from the opening in the earth, first there was a sputter of water. "There she goes!" exclaimed one observer who thought he was the one in the know. But the sputtering ceased, and I refrained from any more comments. A moment later came, and the sputtering again turned into a fountain of hot water streaming toward the heavens about 100 feet high. Everyone looked up, jaws dropping, eyes popping. A sense of wonder filled everyone circling Old Faithful as the geysers sent cascading waters up and up and up. The crowd was spellbound, awe-filled, and dancing with when the water performed its magic for a minute and then quickly returned to earth. Its water supply depleted, and in another 8 minutes, its subterranean plumbing would be filled again, ready to burst forth toward the sky, and other onlookers would witness its majesty. I noticed something that day. Onlookers displayed a sense of awe, a worship-like quality. They had witnessed something powerful, something beyond themselves. One dad said to his kids, "Did you see that? Amazing, wasn't it?" A little boy replied to his sister, "I can't wait to tell Johnny when we get back home." Another shouted, "Hey, Grandpa, did you see that?" Still another said, "Can we watch it again?" With a sense of reverence, people returned to their cars or the gift shop, knowing they had witnessed something spectacular. The same dynamic occurs when we come to worship God, the same dynamic occurs when we come to worship our God, or must I say, should happen. We ought to witness the spectacular hand of God. We are supposed to witness something beyond ourselves. We are to be in awe, spellbound, mesmerized by the life-giving, life-flowing power of God. We should be motivated to tell others about what we have experienced, what Old Faithful does for the tourist at Yellowstone National Park. Our worship of God should do for those who worship God in church. Psalms chapter 40 verse 3 says this: "He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise in our God. Many will see, fear, and put their trust in the Lord. Or as the New Century Version, this is a Bible now, New Century Version Bible translated, will see this and worship him. Will see this and worship him. David had experience with the Lord that impacted his life. God had rescued and refreshed him. How many of us here can say that God has rescued or refreshed us? 2 of us. Well, eventually God's going to rescue and refresh all of you. My Lord.
Well, you don't look...
I can say that I have been rescued and refreshed. And every time I go before God and I find myself caught up in his presence, I feel rescued and refreshed. And that is what we need to feel. That's what worship is. Worship is a time where if you're having doubts about God, if you're having doubts about what you're hearing or what you're feeling, worship is a time. Somebody needs to be worshiping. Somebody needs to be worshiping so that way you, Thomas, can say, you know what? I want to feel that refreshingness. You know what? I may be doubting it today. But you know what? I need to be refreshed. And you know what? Sometimes seeing someone else in worship can bring you to the point of refreshing. So when it's your time to worship and you feel God moving in your spirit and moving in your heart, you know what? God is using that moment of refreshing for you and rescue for you, or just a moment of elation for you, to rescue someone else. That's what worship does. David experienced the presence of God, and he was changed by it. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't refute it. He couldn't say anything against it, because when the presence of God reached his hand down to his life, David was changed. Okay? He put a new song in my mouth and a hymn of praise to my God. David was excited in song and in praise. And he could not contain his joy. He could not contain his happiness. He could not contain his relief. He had to shout and he had to sing. Just a point of reference. Singing is an important spiritual thing that we do. All right, I have expression. It's an important spiritual expression. And it's mentioned in the book of Psalms around 68 times. Okay? So it's not just the same old song that we sing. It's not just the same old story. It's not just the same old you. Whenever you get up there, it's new. Like today, right? We were watching the worship team go at it. Right? I mean, Brother Fred was up there. Oh, Lord Jesus. Hallelujah. You know? And there were people worshiping God. And there were people falling on their faces before God, right? And there were people raising their hands before God. You know what? They're getting something new. That's the point of worship. And there's power in that. Because in that moment, my broken heart becomes new. Where else are you going to get a new heart? Because we've all had a broken heart. Even at your age, I'm sure somebody has broken your heart, Emily. I'm sure somebody has broken your heart, Deja. I'm sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that somebody has tore up that spirit of yours. But you know what it is? Whenever you feel that Spirit of God, this is the benefit of being a Christian. The benefit of being a child of the living God. The benefit is whenever the time of worship comes, don't be afraid of it. Go after it. Because in that moment, you become new. But I'm already a Christian. How can I become new? Oh man, this is lame. The fact of the matter is that even Christians need to be made new. That's the point of worship.